Hello everyone! Thanks for tuning in to hear what I watched while I had an Apple TV Plus subscription. This has been a fun little experiment. It didn't go quite the way I had hoped because I was just too busy in December to watch much, but this month I've been playing catch up, so I do have quite a few things to talk about today. I'll be ending my subscription early next week. I know Masters of the Air will be premiering right after that, and yes, that does sound appealing, but I would rather not pay for another 2 or 3 months just to watch that, and probably what they're hoping is that in the meantime you get hooked on another show that has a second season that premieres right after that ends, and so on. That's how they get ya. I'd rather do what I usually do, which is wait and see. Wait and see how it goes, what people think of it, and then if it's good, I'll probably check it out sometime later when I don't have to wait a whole week between episodes. I certainly wish I'd gone that route with Monarch Legacy of Monsters. If I could go back in time, I would do things differently. I would let the whole series air and find out what people think, and then maybe check it out at my leisure. And I definitely wouldn't sign up for an app in December, which is the worst time to try out anything. What was I thinking? That was my original plan, and I wish I had stuck with it. Then my reaction to the show might have been more favorable. Or not. All in all, the series wasn't great. What lured me in was the promise of a monster show, something as simple as people discovering new monsters and studying them, with a little governmental intrigue thrown in. This wasn't a complete bait and switch, but if you were looking for a lot of monster action, you didn't really get it. I shared my thoughts on the first 3 episodes in another video. Unfortunately, things went downhill after that. The story crawled forward, a lot of it felt like filler, most of the characters weren't compelling or even interesting, the relationships had no chemistry, and at times the acting was bland and amateurish. There are some new monsters, but they are few and far between. They get very little screen time. We don't know much about them. And then there's Godzilla. I'll give them credit. He had 4 or 5 appearances, which is a lot more than I thought he would get. But these appearances, while exciting, were brief with diminishing returns. At a certain point, I knew I was just watching because I felt I had to. Because I had told you that I would. And shortly after that, I realized there's no way this is a limited series. There's gonna be a cliffhanger. They're aiming for a season 2. If I'd known that, I definitely wouldn't have watched it now. Now, the last couple episodes do rally. There's an interesting concept there, and the way things worked out with Kurt Russell and his son Wyatt playing the same character was cool. But I couldn't believe how predictable the twists and reveals were. While the finale did have the strongest emotional moments of the entire series, it also had a deus ex machina you could see coming a mile away. The show did succeed in explaining or expounding on a few things related to Monarch and the the Hollow Earth. I can't even remember what it's called. The Hollow Earth, and spoiler, Apex Cybernetics, which I had to explain to my mom because she couldn't remember anything about Godzilla vs. Kong. But I think it raised as many questions as it answered, instead of just advancing the mythology of the Monsterverse. I'm probably not the best judge, though, because I don't think I was the target audience. This show is for people who watched Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong and Kong Skull Island and wanted to know more about Monarch, the organization. I have never cared much about Monarch. I have felt very little curiosity about its backstory, so this was a tough sell for me from the get-go. Editing Weaselberry here, I would just like to add how unfortunate it was for this show that Godzilla Minus One came out when it did. I couldn't help comparing the two, and obviously Godzilla Minus One was superior, not just to this show, but to everything that's been done with the Monsterverse. Moving right along, most of the original programming that's offered on Apple TV Plus are series. Is series, are series, we can argue over the grammar there. I'm just gonna keep going. TV is in, TV is cool. That's what all the streaming services are doing. Because it's still one of the newer apps, the bulk of these shows have just 1 or 2 seasons, with more likely to come. My thinking was, I'm only going to have this app for a limited time. I don't want to get invested in a ton of TV shows that'll leave me on a cliffhanger and I'll never get to see the follow-up, or if I do, so much time will have passed that I won't remember anything. So I didn't watch a lot of shows, but that's okay because I don't watch much TV anyway. I prefer movies, which is good because I have hundreds that I'm supposed to watch. I did watch one show, though, besides Monarch, and that was Silo, a series starring Rebecca Ferguson that's based on a book about a community of people living underground in a multi-level structure with its own social hierarchy and system of government and a failing power system, where the only glimpse of the outside world is through a viewing screen that shows a barren, forbidding landscape. Here's how I settled on this one. I was trying to choose a show to watch with my mom. I started playing trailers for her. This is the first one I played, and she said, "I want to watch that." So we did. That was easy. She was into it from the get-go. I had a slightly harder time getting into it. It's a darkly lit, kind of grungy show that, like Monarch, has some non-linear storytelling, jumping into flashbacks without preamble. I don't love that style, and so many things seem to adopt it nowadays that I find it kind of tiresome and overdone. But I managed, and once the holidays were over and we were able to watch multiple episodes at once, I liked it better, especially as the plot thickened and things got more exciting. Silo also leaves you with a lot of questions, and it's got a doozy of a cliffhanger, but in this case I do care about getting answers and seeing what happens next. I will say that it reminded me of quite a few things, chiefly a work of juvenile fiction by Jean Duprow titled City of Ember. I reviewed that book, or possibly the whole series, years ago, but I took the video down after I found out that kids were using my comments uncredited in their papers. That was pretty heartbreaking, and that's one reason why I have veered away from doing in-depth book reviews. But anyway, besides the fact that that was a kid's book, and Silo is not a kid's show, it has lots of F-bombs, it does its own thing with the concept. There's a murder mystery wrapped within another much bigger mystery, and there's intrigue and social class issues, and maybe some aspect of science fiction, not sure yet. Lots of stuff going on. It's also chock full of familiar faces from film and TV, including many British folks doing American accents. We enjoyed it, and it left us hungry for more. And now for the films I watched. I've already talked about a couple of these in previous videos, like Greyhound, the World War II movie that stars Tom Hanks going up against German U-boats in the North Atlantic. In a nutshell, I liked the movie a lot. It does have kind of a bumpy start, and it's lacking a standout ensemble. I don't think I said that in my review, but once it gets going, it's very intense with some great effects. I talked about Greyhound in my What Else I Saw in November video. There's a link to that in the description if you want to check it out. Shortly before Christmas, I watched Spirited, the Ryan Reynolds Will Ferrell musical reimagining of A Christmas Carol. It was okay, but it could have been better, and I said much more than that when I reviewed it a couple weeks ago in What Else I Saw in December. There's a link to that in the description. And now I've got a few more films to review. Number 1 is 2021's Finch. Tom Hanks, again, stars in this endearing post-apocalyptic tale of a man, his dog, and his robot friends making a cross-country journey. This simple film has only 4 characters, and only 2 of them speak, so Hanks is essentially on his own here. And while I think people would say he's had a couple questionable performances in the past few years, this is not one of them. A lot of credit also goes to Caleb Landry Jones, who voices the robot Jeff, as well as the puppeteers, props, and effects teams who worked together to make him come alive. As much as I mistrust AI and how it may be used, there are lots of good robot movies out there, by which I mean good movies with good robots who show compassion and caring and humanity. This kind of reminded me of Chappie in the sense that it had an adolescent robot in a rough environment learning to function by trial and error. The film is tense at times, it can be funny, and it's also sad. I can't believe I got so choked up over a game of fetch. While this one is less prestigious than some of the other movies on the app, it was highly enjoyable and I thought well done. One thing this app did that drives me crazy, and I know other apps do it as well, is they cut away from the end titles after like 2 seconds, and you have to scramble for the remote if you don't want it to start playing whatever's up next. I like to watch the end titles and listen to the music. To me, it's as much a part of the movie as anything else. And in this case, the end titles music was Don McLean's American Pie. Well, I failed to stop the app from cutting away in time, but I went back and replayed the movie and fast-forwarded through the whole thing just so the song could play out. Because when American Pie comes on, you've got to play it all the way to the end. It's just one of those things. Number 2 is a movie that just came out, The Family Plan. Mark Wahlberg plays a former assassin relishing the peaceful, humdrum life of a happily married suburban dad of 3 when enemies from his past show up, forcing him to go on the run with his clueless family. My mom and I decided to watch this movie on a lark because it looked fun. And it was. It did seem kind of weird at first. I'm not sure if it's the UHD I'm not used to, or just how movies look in 2024, but it seemed a trifle artificial. But after an uneven start, it didn't take long for me to get into it. The 2 teenage kids were insufferable for a while, but that's part of the arc, and I really liked how things turned out. I also liked that the baby was the only one in on what was going on and was having a blast in every fight and chase scene. The movie also stars Michelle Monaghan, who gets to do some action stuff, and Kieran Hines. He's supposed to be British, but sounded more like an old-fashioned Italian gangster. But that was fun too. Some of the jokes are corny and some of the plot twists are predictable because I've seen movies before, but that's fine, and on the whole, this was quite a good time. Number 3, I'm sure you've heard of, 2023's Killers of the Flower Moon. Based on a true story, this Martin Scorsese-directed period piece examines a series of murders in the Osage Nation committed as part of a plan to obtain their oil-rich land. The plot is a sinister and despicable one, shocking in its cold-blooded patience and hypocrisy. 2 Scorsese veterans, Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, star together alongside Lily Gladstone. I heard the book it's based on focused more on the FBI investigation, but Scorsese instead focused on DiCaprio's character and his relationship with his Osage wife. Lily Gladstone is very interesting to watch. She gives a nuanced performance, and there's something about her expression that's unique. You can't always tell what she's thinking, and her soft voice has a languid quality that grabs your attention. The biggest questions have to do with DiCaprio's character's morality and autonomy. Is he doing bad things willingly? Is he conflicted? Or is he just a numbskull doing whatever his uncle tells him and unaware of what's really going on? I think DiCaprio does a good job making you wonder, making you study his expressions and responses, searching for clues. I don't know if people feel this movie lived up to the hype that preceded it, but I thought it was engrossing, with good casting, creative visual storytelling, interesting music. I do think the pace is a little slow at times, but it'll have one slow scene followed by an abrupt cutaway to something startlingly violent, so to call it slow isn't accurate. I'm not sure it needed to be 3.5 hours long, though. I remember the kerfuffle when it came out that at least one theater had added an intermission so the audience could stretch and take a potty break. Scorsese heard about this and he was angry, which is totally justifiable. I didn't have to take his masterclass to know how meticulously planned and timed everything in a movie is, and it is not up to some projectionist to decide where to make a cut. That said, it's a lot to ask people to sit through a film this long with no breaks. It's not good for your eyes, or your legs, or your circulation, or your bladder. We couldn't do it, and because we started kind of late, we ended up not finishing until a whole day later. Now that's almost worst case scenario. If it's a day or more later, then you might as well just restart the movie, because all the momentum is gone. You will have forgotten things, so if the second half references things that happened in the first half, you're likely to miss it. The more time goes by, the less fair it is to the movie to keep going. You should just start the movie over. I try to get through a movie without taking any breaks. But sometimes, you gotta do what you gotta do. When you've gotta go, you gotta go. If that means you have to stop for 10 minutes... that's okay. More than that, getting risky. I wish we hadn't stopped, but I will say I ended up stopping in a pretty good place. I don't think there was a better place that I could have stopped. There's a shift in the narrative that's heralded by the arrival of a new character, and this happens about 2 hours in. A lengthy sequence with Gladstone and DiCaprio ends, and this music that's been playing as an undercurrent through the whole thing suddenly stops, and then there's a cut to a new scene and someone starts knocking on the front door, and this actually worked out very well. I'm letting you know what we did in case you want to do the same thing. Not that I'm recommending it. I do feel like if you can get through the whole movie all in one go, or with 5 minutes pause in between, then you should do that by all means. You should always try to do that. It's a twisted, diabolical story with some disturbing scenes, and all the more disturbing because this is based on a true story. But there's also a bluntness to the dialogue at times that's kind of funny. There's humor in the exasperation certain characters express, and a couple times I laughed, and then I wasn't sure if it was okay to laugh or not. One other thing that stuck out is the ending, which was really different, kind of random, but also very cool if you like the kind of thing it is. Is that vague enough? Number 4 is 2021's The Tragedy of Macbeth, written and directed by Joel Cohen, adapted from the Shakespeare play. This interpretation stars Denzel Washington as the ambitious warrior who receives a prophecy saying he'll become King of Scotland. To precipitate that prophecy, he and his wife Lady Macbeth, Frances McDormand, put a grisly plan in place to seize the throne. When this first came out, I thought it looked a bit artsy-fartsy, but after I watched a couple scenes on YouTube, I was intrigued. And perturbed, because one of them was the contortionist scene, and I was like, what the heck is this? But it turns out this was entertaining. For starters, who doesn't like Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand? They are both excellent here, as is Catherine Hunter as the weird sisters and the old man. That first scene of hers is so creepy, but also amazing. Her voice, her physicality, and it's your first clear sign that this is going to be an extraordinary adaptation. It's practically a horror movie with its stark visuals, eerie sound design, and quick but powerful moments of violence. Yes, the desaturation and the 4:3 aspect ratio do make it kind of artsy-fartsy, but the performances aren't pretentious or overdone. Most of the actors deliver their early modern English lines without affected accents or stilted, lofty speech. There were a couple weak spots, though, from young, inexperienced actors who struggled to make the dialogue sound natural. But by far the most incredible thing about the movie is its production design. It is amazing. The sets, the use of shadows and light and lines and shapes and props and so on. It's jaw-dropping. It screams German expressionism, and it's absolutely beautiful. Had the lead actors' performances been any less than they were, they would have been completely devoured by their surroundings and the cinematography. Number 5 was awarded Best Picture a couple years ago, 2021's CODA, about a teenage girl who is the child of deaf adults and the only hearing member of her family. She strives to find her place in the world, torn between her duty to her family, who needs her as an interpreter in their fishing business, and her desire to pursue her love of singing. This is a very good film that's both funny and touching. Emilia Jones perfectly embodies her character's struggle to fit in with her peers, her community, and her own family. The typical awkwardness of adolescence is worsened by the burden of having to translate everything for her parents, which is something that elevates this from being a run-of-the-mill coming-of-age story, and it's where a lot of the humor comes in. She winds up in some extremely embarrassing and not family-friendly situations, which is hilarious, but you also feel tons of sympathy for her. Her family seems pretty content. She's the one who feels frustrated and ostracized. The combination of deafness and music, featuring a passionate teacher who demands the most of his students, definitely reminded me of Mr. Holland's Opus, which is one of my mom's favorite movies, except she can't watch a single minute of the thing without crying her eyeballs out, so she's basically not able to watch it anymore. CODA certainly has some overlap with that and other films, and I found out it's actually a remake of a 2014 Belgian-French production, but with two significant changes. The setting, moving from a French farm to Gloucester, Massachusetts, and the casting of actual deaf people in the deaf roles. Marlee Matlin and Troy Kotsur play the parents, Kotsur going on to win a historic Best Supporting Actor Oscar. And number 6 is 2023's Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, which chronicles the actor's rise to fame, his diagnosis with Parkinson's, an incurable degenerative brain disease, and how he lives his life now. Michael J. Fox took one of the most devastating pieces of news a person can receive and refused to let it bring him down. He's always shown an admirable attitude, not feeling sorry for himself or snapping at anyone who shows him pity, but just living his life with an irrepressible sense of humor, which includes the ability to laugh at himself. I vaguely remember when he came forward in the late 90s and revealed that he'd secretly had Parkinson's disease for years. I remember when we would watch The American President, which we did an awful lot for some reason. My mom would point out how he would keep his hand in his pocket or fiddle with something to hide the tremors. So I've always known about him dealing with this disease. But it was enlightening to see it on a more intimate level, and as a documentary, it's well done with a brilliant use of archive footage. There's the present-day stuff, with a sit-down interview, Fox having physical therapy, hanging out with his family, but the biographical segments blend dramatization with archive footage from films, TV series, and talk shows he did. Film and TV clips are taken out of their original context to fit his own story, with the changes from actual footage to reenactment almost seamless. It's an unusual way to do it, but it worked very well. I also love that he and his wife Tracy have been together ever since they fell in love as young actors on his show Family Ties. You can tell that he's more in love with her than ever, and she is his constant support, never abandoning him at any of his low points, and taking everything in stride. That kind of relationship is rare, not just in Hollywood. Fox has taken this opportunity to tell his story now, because someday his condition will have worsened to the point that he won't be able to. That's tragic. But you know he doesn't want you to feel sad for him. He considers himself very lucky, and not just for the life he had before, but for the life he still has. It's a great and inspiring watch, and I'm glad they made it. And that's what I watched while I had Apple TV Plus. I do have it for a couple more days. I don't know if I'll get to squeeze anything else in before I cancel. If I do, I'll talk about it next month. All told, I was a satisfied customer. They send way too many emails, but that's pretty typical these days, and I was pleased with pretty much everything I watched. And I know my mom was thrilled to see some new stuff. For a little while there, it was like we were kind of cool. We were watching new movies that people were talking about. Well, I guess that's really only the case with a couple things, but let me have the illusion. I think 8 movies and 2 seasons of TV is pretty good for $20. If you think about the fact that one adult would have to spend about $120 to $150 to see these movies in the theater. Of course, my preference is to wait until things come out on DVD or Blu-ray and rent them from the library, which is free. But with streaming originals, it's no guarantee that any of these things will ever get a physical release. If you want to see them, you've got to go and get a subscription. Apple TV Plus does offer a free 7-day trial, and then you get charged $10 a month. It used to be less. Shortly before I signed up, they increased the price. That's how it goes these days. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts on any of the content I discussed here, or anything that you've watched on the app in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.